Picture the dark waters of the Mediterranean. 1,000 years ago, a Byzantine warship cuts through the night, its target an enemy fleet closing in. Suddenly, a terrifying roar erupts from its bow. A jet of liquid fire screams across the water, clinging to everything it touches. Wood, sails, even the sea itself seems to burn, defying all attempts to douse the flames with water. Warriors who moments before felt invincible now face an unstoppable inferno, a weapon so devastating it feels less like human invention and more like a force of divine wrath unleashed upon the world. This was Greek fire, one of history's most feared and enigmatic weapons, a technological marvel so potent it shaped empires and decided the fate of civilizations, yet whose secrets vanished as completely as the flames it produced. For centuries, this mysterious substance has captivated historians, scientists, and adventurers alike. How could a weapon from the distant past remain so far beyond our understanding today? What combination of ingenuity, chemistry, and sheer creativity allowed the Byzantines to harness such destructive power, and why did that knowledge slip through our fingers? Greek fire wasn't just a tool of war, it was a symbol of human brilliance at its most daring and elusive, a reminder that some discoveries are so extraordinary they defy time itself. And now we're setting out on a journey to uncover those secrets, to explore whether modern science can finally accomplish what centuries of speculation could not, recreating Greek fire. Join us as we dive into one of history's greatest mysteries, a puzzle woven from ancient texts, chemical possibilities, and the echoes of battles fought long ago. We'll examine the clues left behind, separate myth from reality, and witness the thrilling attempts of today's experts to reverse engineer this legendary invention. This is more than a story about fire. It's about human curiosity, the drive to unlock the past, and the awe we feel when confronting something that once seemed impossible. So settle in. What you're about to discover might just change how you see history, science, and the incredible power of a flame that refused to die. To understand its legendary status, we need to grasp what made Greek fire so uniquely terrifying. This wasn't just a simple flame or a pot of burning oil. Greek fire was the Byzantine Empire's most guarded state secret, a sophisticated naval weapon system that gave their often outnumbered fleets a decisive and horrifying advantage. Its most infamous property was its ability to burn even on water. Imagine the sheer terror of watching a wave of fire rush toward your ship, flames skimming across the surface of the sea, seemingly feeding on the water itself. This defiance of nature made it virtually impossible to extinguish by traditional means. Dousing it with water only seemed to spread the flames, and smothering it required sand or, as some accounts suggest, vinegar, supplies rarely on hand in the heat of a naval battle. But the horror didn't stop with its water-resistant properties. The substance was also famously sticky, a thick, glue-like liquid that clung tenaciously to whatever it touched: wooden hulls, canvas sails, and most tragically, human skin. This created a persistent, all-consuming inferno that was incredibly difficult to stop once it started. The delivery method itself was a feat of engineering that added to the psychological spectacle. It was deployed from bronze tubes mounted on the prows of Byzantine warships, known as siphons. Operators would pump pressurized air through these tubes, projecting the liquid fire over impressive distances in a continuous, roaring jet. To an enemy sailor, it would have looked and sounded like the Byzantines had harnessed the breath of a dragon. This combination of terrifying characteristics elevated Greek fire beyond a mere tool of warfare into the realm of psychological domination. The sight of a Byzantine dromon turning to present its bronze nozzle was enough to sow panic and break formations before a single flame was even lit. It created an aura of invincibility around the Byzantine navy, making them seem not just technologically superior but almost mystically empowered. In an age of close-quarters combat and boarding actions, this weapon allowed the Byzantines to strike from a distance with a force that felt utterly supernatural, securing their naval dominance for centuries and forever cementing its reputation as the most fearsome incendiary device the world had ever seen. To appreciate why such a devastating weapon was created, we have to step back into a world on the brink of collapse. The 7th and 8th centuries were not a golden age for the Byzantine Empire, they were a fight for its very existence. The empire was reeling from waves of unimaginable pressure, a constant state of siege that threatened to snuff out the last light of the Roman world. From the east, the explosive rise of the Arab caliphates brought a formidable new enemy to their doorstep. These weren't just raiders, they were a unified, zealous force with immense resources and a rapidly expanding naval power. Arab fleets began to dominate the Mediterranean, launching relentless attacks on Constantinople itself, aiming to capture the legendary capital and crown of the Christian world. The Byzantines found themselves outmatched and outnumbered at sea, their traditional naval tactics insufficient against the swarm of enemy ships. They were fighting for survival, and conventional warfare was failing. In this desperate context, innovation wasn't a luxury or a scholarly pursuit, it was a matter of life and death. The empire needed a force multiplier, something so shocking and powerful it could neutralize the overwhelming numerical advantage of their enemies. They needed a weapon that could strike fear into the heart of any sailor who dared approach their shores, something that could turn the tide of a battle in an instant and make their warships, however few, seem invincible. This existential threat created the perfect crucible for invention. The pressure to survive catalyzed a leap in military technology. It was within this atmosphere of sheer necessity that a Syrian Greek architect and chemist named Kallinikos emerged. Fleeing the Arab conquest of his home, he brought his knowledge to Constantinople and presented the emperor with a terrifying new tool. Greek fire was born from this convergence of desperation and genius. It was the empire's answer to annihilation, a technological Hail Mary that would become the cornerstone of their naval defense for centuries. Without the relentless pressure of these Arab sieges, this fiery marvel might never have been conceived, let alone perfected and deployed to such breathtaking effect. Yet the story of its origin is shrouded in as much mystery as the formula itself, centered on a single, elusive figure, Kallinikos of Heliopolis. History remembers him as a Syrian Greek architect and chemist who fled the advancing Arab armies, arriving in Constantinople as a refugee with a world-altering secret. The tale goes that he presented his discovery, a method to create a liquid that would ignite on water, to Emperor Constantine IV around the year 673, a gift that arrived at the empire's most desperate hour. He wasn't just offering a new weapon, he was offering salvation, and the emperor, facing the existential threat of the Arab sieges, undoubtedly saw its potential immediately. Kallinikos was likely integrated into a state-sponsored team of engineers, tasked with refining and deploying this terrifying new technology that would become the cornerstone of Byzantine naval defense. But was he truly the sole, brilliant inventor, a lone genius who concocted this marvel in isolation? Many historians argue this is an oversimplification, a neat origin story that credits a single man for what was more likely the culmination of centuries of experimentation. The Eastern Roman Empire was the inheritor of a vast body of knowledge from the ancient world, including the chemical and alchemical traditions of Alexandria and the Hellenistic world. Incendiary weapons, often based on combinations of pitch, sulfur, and naphtha, had been used in warfare for ages. What makes Kallinikos' story so compelling is not that he invented fire in a bottle, but that he may have been the one to perfect a stable, pressurized delivery system. His background as an architect suggests a profound understanding of mechanics and engineering. Perhaps his true genius was not in the chemistry of the substance itself, but in the design of the bronze siphons and pumps that could project it as a controlled, continuous stream of fire against enemy ships. This perspective casts him less as a mythical inventor and more as the lead engineer on a top-secret military project, the man who successfully weaponized and stabilized existing concepts. He might have improved the formula's consistency, increased its burn time, or solved the critical problem of how to safely pressurize and eject it without catastrophic failure. In this light, Greek fire appears not as a sudden bolt from the blue, but as the pinnacle of a long evolution of military technology, a breakthrough achieved under immense pressure and refined by a brilliant mind who synthesized existing knowledge into something truly revolutionary. Whether he was the original architect or the masterful improver, his name is forever tied to one of history's most formidable and elusive weapons, a symbol of how individual ingenuity can emerge at the precise moment it is most needed to change the course of history. That moment of truth arrived in the year 678. For years, the massive Arab fleet of the Umayyad Caliphate had blockaded Constantinople, a seemingly endless armada determined to starve the city into surrender and claim the ultimate prize of the Byzantine Empire. The defenders were exhausted, supplies were dwindling, and hope was fading. But the Byzantines had been preparing a devastating surprise. As the Arab ships gathered for what they believed would be a final assault, the Byzantine navy unleashed their secret weapon for the first time. From the prows of their dromons, great bronze siphons roared to life, not with arrows or stones, but with a continuous, screaming jet of liquid flame. The effect was instantaneous and utterly catastrophic. This was not like any fire the Arab sailors had ever encountered. It did not sizzle and die on the water's surface. It raced across it, creating a moving inferno that leaped from ship to ship. The sticky, unquenchable substance clung to wooden hulls and canvas sails, creating a blaze so intense and so persistent that throwing water on it only made the horror worse, spreading the flaming liquid further. The orderly Arab formation dissolved into a chaotic inferno. Panicked sailors, faced with a supernatural-seeming force they could neither understand nor combat, leaped into the sea only to find the water itself burning around them. The very element that was their domain had become an agent of their destruction. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage. For warriors who believed their victory was divinely ordained, this weapon seemed like a direct affront to the natural order, a clear sign that the Christian God was fighting for the defenders. The shock and awe it inspired shattered their morale completely. The once proud fleet was reduced to a smoldering wreck, forcing a humiliating retreat and effectively ending the siege. This single, decisive deployment did more than just win a battle. It saved an empire from almost certain collapse and secured the reputation of Greek fire for centuries to come. It transformed from a classified military project into a legendary, almost mythical force, a symbol of Byzantine ingenuity and power that would be whispered about in fear by their enemies for generations. The terrifying effectiveness of Greek fire was not just in its chemical composition, but in the sophisticated machinery built to unleash it. This was no simple torch thrown by hand. It was an integrated weapons system, and its most iconic component was the siphon. Mounted on the reinforced prow of a Byzantine dromon or warship, this device was a masterpiece of military engineering. Fashioned from bronze to withstand the immense heat and pressure, the siphon was likely a complex apparatus involving a sealed reservoir for the pre-mixed fuel, a powerful air pump, and a nozzle or spout. The operator, a highly trained specialist, would have worked the pump, forcing compressed air into the reservoir. This pressurized the liquid inside, pushing it up through a tube and out of the nozzle. At the mouth of this nozzle, a permanent, shielded flame or a lit wick would instantly ignite the volatile mixture as it shot forth, creating that infamous continuous jet of fire. The engineering challenges they had to overcome were immense. They needed to create airtight seals that could contain the pressure without leaking the highly flammable substance. The metal had to be thick enough to not soften or warp from the heat of both the external ignition source and the reaction itself. The pump mechanism had to be both powerful and reliable enough to maintain a steady stream in the chaos of a rolling sea battle. Getting any part of this wrong wouldn't just mean a malfunction, it would mean a catastrophic explosion that would consume their own ship. The fact that they deployed this technology so effectively speaks to a remarkable level of mechanical sophistication lost to the wider world for centuries. But the Byzantines didn't stop with ship-mounted artillery. They also developed a smaller, portable version known as the siphon, which translates literally to hand siphon. This was the equivalent of a medieval flamethrower, a weapon that brought the terror of Greek fire from the sea onto the land. Imagine a Byzantine soldier aiming a bronze tube connected to a pressurized tank carried on his back, able to project a smaller but still deadly stream of fire at enemy siege equipment, gates, or even personnel. The siphon turned individual soldiers into walking engines of destruction, capable of clearing battlements and breaking infantry formations with a weapon that seemed almost supernatural to those facing it. This portable system underscores just how versatile and integrated Greek fire was within Byzantine military doctrine. It was a strategic tool adaptable to both grand naval engagements and close-quarters combat. The true genius of this system lay in its psychological impact as much as its physical destructiveness. The sight of a Byzantine warship turning its prow to face the enemy was no longer just a prelude to ramming or boarding. It was the herald of an unavoidable, otherworldly doom. The deep roar of the pressurized fuel igniting, the sight of a solid stream of fire arcing across the waves, and the impossible spectacle of water itself burning, these sensory assaults were weapons in themselves. They broke enemy morale before the flames even made contact. The siphon and the siphon were more than just delivery mechanisms. They were the instruments of a profound psychological warfare, designed to make the Byzantine military seem not just advanced but invincible and divinely favored. This combination of mechanical innovation and theatrical terror is what secured its legendary status for centuries. Historical accounts from those who witnessed Greek fire, both Byzantine and Arab, paint a picture of a weapon so bizarre and terrifying it seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Its behavior was unlike any other incendiary of its time, and these unique characteristics are our primary clues for reverse engineering its composition centuries later. The first and most infamous property was its apparent ability to burn on water. This wasn't a simple case of oil floating on the surface and igniting. Witnesses described the fire actively skimming across the waves, almost as if it were feeding on the water itself. This single characteristic points directly to a key ingredient that couldn't simply be extinguished, it had to be smothered. Accounts mention that only substances like sand or strong vinegar could quench the flames, suggesting a chemical reaction that water would only exacerbate. Adding to its horror was its stubborn, adhesive quality. It wasn't a fleeting burst of flame, it was a thick, glue-like liquid that clung with tenacity to whatever it touched. Once a ship's hull or a soldier's shield was struck, the fire would stick and continue to burn with relentless intensity. This wasn't a fire you could shake off, it was a death sentence that latched on and consumed everything in its path. The substance also generated immense heat, described as melting metal and reducing wooden ships to ash in moments. This intense thermal output suggests a fuel that burned at a significantly higher temperature than common oils or pine pitch. The entire spectacle was accompanied by a terrifying sensory experience designed to break enemy morale. Witnesses consistently report a loud, roaring noise as the jet was ejected from the siphon, a sound that would have been deafening and utterly alien on an ancient battlefield. This roar, combined with the thick, black smoke pouring from the clinging flames, created a scene straight from a nightmare. The combination of these traits, water resistance, adhesiveness, intense heat, and theatrical sound and smoke, points to a complex mixture, not a single ingredient. It was a carefully formulated medieval napalm, a weapon designed for maximum physical destruction and profound psychological shock, ensuring that those who faced it would never forget the experience. The Byzantine Empire understood that the true power of Greek fire lay not just in its devastating effects, but in its absolute secrecy. They guarded its formula with a paranoia and intensity unmatched by almost any other state secret in history, treating it not as mere intellectual property but as a divine gift crucial to their very survival. This was not a recipe to be copied into a cookbook or shared among alchemists. It was a matter of national security on an unprecedented scale, protected by a veil of silence so complete it effectively became a form of strategic deterrence. The knowledge was so restricted that it was likely confined to a tiny, exclusive circle, probably the reigning emperor himself and the descendants of Kallinikos, who were entrusted with its production and deployment. This created a powerful, quasi-hereditary guild of firemasters, bound by blood and oath to the empire. The penalties for anyone outside this circle who dared to seek the secret were predictably draconian. Historical sources suggest that the punishment for espionage or attempted theft of the formula was not merely imprisonment, but death. The Byzantines were willing to go to any length to prevent their ultimate advantage from falling into enemy hands. This culture of extreme secrecy explains the most frustrating aspect of the Greek fire mystery for modern historians, the almost complete absence of a written record. No detailed, verified recipe has ever been discovered in any Byzantine archive or manuscript. It's highly probable that the formula was never written down in a complete, straightforward manner. Instead, it was likely passed down orally from one generation of the Kallinikos family to the next, a set of instructions memorized and practiced under strict supervision, ensuring that no single document could ever be captured or leaked. This strategy of obfuscation extended beyond mere words. Some historians theorize that even if fragments were recorded, they might have been written in a form of cipher or disguised within allegorical alchemical texts, using code names for ingredients to further protect the truth from prying eyes. The Byzantines were masters of deception and misinformation. They actively cultivated the myth that Greek fire was a supernatural force, a belief that made their enemies fear it all the more and perhaps discouraged them from even attempting to replicate it through conventional means. Why try to reverse engineer a weapon bestowed by God? This psychological layer of protection was just as important as the physical safeguards. By allowing a supernatural aura to grow around the weapon, they made the secret seem not just valuable but unknowable to anyone but themselves. This monumental effort to conceal, this total commitment to silence, is the primary reason why a technology so potent and so widely witnessed could vanish from history so completely, leaving behind only echoes of its terror and a puzzle that continues to captivate us today. To unlock the chemical identity of this legendary weapon, we must start with its most fundamental component, the flammable liquid that formed its very lifeblood. The most compelling candidate for this base fuel is a light crude oil or a naturally occurring substance known as naphtha. Unlike the thicker, heavier tars and pitches used in simpler incendiaries, naphtha is a volatile, low-viscosity liquid, often clear or pale yellow, that evaporates easily and ignites with a fierce intensity. This physical property is the first crucial piece of the puzzle, as a thin, watery liquid would be far easier to pump through a pressurized bronze siphon than a thick, sluggish tar. Its low viscosity would allow it to be projected in a continuous, focused stream, exactly as described by terrified observers who witnessed it shooting from Byzantine warships. But the true genius of choosing naphtha lies in its behavior on water, which aligns perfectly with historical accounts. Due to its low density, naphtha does not mix with water. Instead, it floats effortlessly on the surface, creating a thin, rapidly spreading film. When ignited, this film creates the horrifying illusion that the very sea is ablaze, with flames skimming across the waves to engulf everything in their path. This characteristic alone would have been utterly terrifying and seemingly supernatural to anyone who witnessed it for the first time. Furthermore, throwing water onto a naphtha fire is perhaps the worst thing one could do. The force of the water would simply splash and scatter the burning liquid, spreading the flames over a wider area and intensifying the inferno, a phenomenon that would have cemented the weapon's reputation as unquenchable by conventional means. The critical question then becomes, did the Byzantines have access to such a substance? The answer is a resounding yes, and the source was literally bubbling up from the ground around them. The entire Black Sea and Caspian Sea region, firmly within the Byzantine sphere of influence, is historically riddled with natural petroleum seepages. One of the most famous and well-documented sources was on the Absheron Peninsula near modern-day Baku, an area so rich in oil that eternal flames burned from seeps for centuries, fueled by natural gas vents. These fire temples were noted by travelers like Marco Polo and were known in the ancient world. The Byzantine Empire, with its extensive trade networks and control over key ports in the Crimea and Anatolia, would have had direct knowledge of and access to these natural reservoirs. They wouldn't have needed to drill. They could simply collect the valuable, light oil as it pooled on the surface or seeped from rocks, providing them with a ready and abundant supply of the key ingredient for their most powerful weapon. This geographical fortune gave them a strategic resource that their enemies lacked, turning the very geology of their realm into a cornerstone of their naval dominance. While naphtha provides a compelling explanation for the fuel's behavior, it leaves a critical question unanswered. How did this volatile mixture ignite the very moment it struck its target? Pouring flammable liquid from a siphon is one thing, but creating an instant roaring jet of fire requires an ignition system that is both immediate and utterly reliable in the chaos of a naval battle. This is where the theories become even more fascinating, pointing to a potential self-igniting component that would have made Greek fire truly autonomous and terrifyingly efficient. The most debated candidates for this pyrotechnic trigger are two substances with dramatic aquatic reactions, quicklime and calcium phosphide. Let's first consider quicklime, scientifically known as calcium oxide. This compound is created by heating limestone to extremely high temperatures, a process well within the capabilities of Byzantine chemists. Quicklime's most famous property is its hypergolic reaction with water. Upon contact, it undergoes a vigorous chemical process called slaking, releasing a tremendous amount of heat. This isn't a gentle warming, it's an intense, rapid exothermic reaction capable of reaching temperatures high enough to ignite tinder or, in this theoretical context, a surrounding film of volatile naphtha. The appealing part of this theory is its simplicity and availability. The Byzantines had ample access to limestone and the kilns needed to produce quicklime, which was already commonly used in construction mortar. The tactical concept would be elegant. The pre-mixed formula containing both naphtha and powdered quicklime is projected from the siphon. The moment this slurry hits the humid air or splashes onto the seawater surrounding the enemy ship, the quicklime reacts violently. The sudden burst of heat then serves as a built-in ignition source, setting the entire stream ablaze without the need for an external flame at the nozzle. This would eliminate a major point of failure and create the shocking spectacle of fire erupting spontaneously on contact. However, this theory faces some significant chemical hurdles. The reaction between quicklime and water, while hot, is often not instantaneous enough to create a reliable ignition for a fast-moving stream of liquid. It tends to clump and react unevenly, potentially causing a delayed fizzle rather than a dramatic explosion of flame. More critically, the reaction produces calcium hydroxide, a slaky, non-flammable residue that could potentially clog the sophisticated pumping mechanism of the siphon, rendering the entire weapon useless after just a few shots. This leads us to a more exotic and perhaps more plausible candidate, calcium phosphide. This compound is produced by heating lime together with phosphate-rich materials like bone ash or animal bones in a high-temperature furnace. Its chemical behavior is even more dramatic and aligns beautifully with the historical descriptions. When calcium phosphide comes into contact with water, it does not merely produce heat, it generates phosphine gas pH3. Phosphine is highly flammable and, crucially, it is pyrophoric, meaning it ignites spontaneously upon contact with the oxygen in air. There would be no delay, no need for an external spark. The very act of the mixture hitting the water would create a ghostly, self-igniting gas that would instantly envelop the target in a cloud of fire, which would then ignite the surrounding naphtha. This reaction is fierce, immediate, and would perfectly explain the terrifying roar and sudden conflagration described by witnesses. The chemistry is sound, and the required ingredients, bones and lime, were certainly available. The obstacle here is one of scale and safety. Producing calcium phosphide in significant quantities would have been a dangerous and complex industrial process for the time. Furthermore, phosphine gas itself is highly toxic, posing a severe risk to the operators mixing the formula and loading the siphons. Yet, this very danger could have contributed to the weapon's mystique and the extreme secrecy surrounding its production. Perhaps the Kallinikos clan guarded their lives as fiercely as their secret because handling the ingredients was a lethal gamble. Whether it was the intense heat of quicklime or the ghostly flame of phosphine, the inclusion of a self-igniting component transforms Greek fire from a simple flamethrower into a truly automatic weapon, a masterpiece of chemical engineering that must have seemed like pure magic to those who faced its wrath. While the base fuel and its ignition system were critical, a weapon designed to cling to ships and burn with supernatural intensity would have required more than just volatile oil. This is where our investigation turns to potential additives, thickeners and intensifiers that could transform a simple flaming liquid into the persistent, all-consuming horror described in the chronicles. Two prime candidates emerge from the annals of ancient warfare: pine resin and sulfur, each offering a unique and terrifying enhancement to the basic formula. Consider first the sticky, tenacious quality of Greek fire. Witnesses consistently described it as a glue-like substance that adhered to whatever it touched, making it impossible to scrape or shake off. A thin, watery naphtha, while excellent for pumping and spreading, would lack this vital adhesive property. It might burn quickly, but it could also run off surfaces or be sluiced away with water. To achieve that infamous cling, a thickener was essential. Pine resin, also known as pitch or tar, is the most logical choice. For millennia, cultures around the Mediterranean had harvested this viscous substance from pine trees, using it to waterproof ships and as a base for simpler incendiary weapons. When added to naphtha, pine resin would act as a natural polymer, creating a thickened, sticky gel. This gel would not only cling to wooden hulls and sails, but would also burn longer and more persistently than a simple liquid fuel. A sailor struck by this concoction would find himself trapped in a sticky, burning prison, a detail that matches the historical accounts of its horrific effectiveness. But what about the sheer ferocity of the heat? Some reports suggest Greek fire could melt metal and reduce ships to ash in moments, implying a blaze of extraordinary temperature. This is where sulfur enters the equation. Known to ancient alchemists as brimstone, sulfur has a remarkably low ignition temperature and burns with an intensely hot blue-flamed fire. Its inclusion in a mixture would significantly boost the thermal output, creating the kind of inferno that could compromise the structural integrity of a ship. Perhaps more terrifyingly, burning sulfur produces thick clouds of sulfur dioxide gas, a toxic, choking fume that would have asphyxiated enemy crews who weren't immediately consumed by the flames. This added a cruel, chemical warfare dimension to the physical destruction, clearing decks and making any attempt to fight the fire a suffocating nightmare. The combination of sticky resin and intensifying sulfur would create a multi-layered threat, a physical binding agent, a heightened thermal reaction, and a toxic atmospheric effect. We can find support for this theory by looking at other contemporary Byzantine incendiary recipes. Historical texts reference a weapon called sea fire, which many scholars believe was either a precursor to or a variant of the more advanced Greek fire. Recipes for these earlier incendiaries often list exact combinations of pine pitch, sulfur, and other combustibles like asphalt or wax. These were often cooked together in large kettles to create a homogeneous, sticky paste that could be thrown in pots or packed into tubes. The technological leap of Greek fire may not have been inventing a new recipe from whole cloth, but rather taking this existing concept of a thickened incendiary and supercharging it. By substituting common pitch with the more volatile and water-repellent naphtha, and then perfecting a pressurized delivery system to project it, the Byzantines transformed a potent but clumsy weapon into a precise and unstoppable naval force. The addition of a self-igniting component like quicklime or calcium phosphide was the final, brilliant piece of the puzzle, automating the ignition process and completing the evolution from simple fire pot to the legendary siphon that decided the fate of empires. This brings us to one of the most controversial and tantalizing theories surrounding the lost formula, the potential inclusion of saltpeter. Also known as potassium nitrate, saltpeter is the key oxidizing agent in black powder, and its presence in Greek fire would fundamentally rewrite the history of warfare, suggesting the Byzantines had stumbled upon gunpowder centuries before its documented appearance in China. Proponents of this theory point to some compelling, albeit circumstantial, evidence. The most striking argument is the weapon's reported behavior. The loud roaring noise described by witnesses doesn't sound like a simple liquid fuel fire. It echoes the distinct report of a controlled deflagration, the kind of rapid burning characteristic of an oxidizer-rich mixture like gunpowder. Furthermore, the sheer force needed to project a continuous stream of liquid over a significant distance suggests a propellant with more power than just human-pumped air. Could the mixture itself have been generating its own pressurized gas as it burned, effectively turning the siphon into a primitive rocket nozzle? The chemistry on paper seems plausible. A mixture containing naphtha, resins, and saltpeter would indeed create a fiercely burning, self-oxidizing composition. Unlike a standard fire that requires atmospheric oxygen, this blend would carry its own oxygen supply, allowing it to burn with terrifying intensity even in confined spaces or underwater, a property that would perfectly explain its alleged defiance of being doused. This theory offers a neat, all-in-one chemical package that accounts for the propulsion, the roar, and the intense, unquenchable nature of the flames. It presents a vision of Greek fire not as a simple incendiary, but as the world's first true explosive projectile weapon, a terrifying leap in military technology that was lost as completely as it was revolutionary. However, the case against saltpeter is arguably even stronger, rooted in practical history and chemistry. The first and most significant obstacle is a complete lack of archaeological evidence. Despite centuries of excavation and study in the Byzantine world, not a single trace of potassium nitrate has ever been found in a context related to Greek fire or its deployment. This is a deafening silence. Furthermore, the purification of saltpeter from natural deposits or through the collection of niter beds is a complex and specific process, one that leaves behind telltale evidence. If the Byzantines had mastered this technology on an industrial scale, we would expect to find some record of the production sites, the chemical knowledge, or the infrastructure required. Yet, no such evidence exists. The historical timeline also works against this theory. Gunpowder's definitive history begins in 9th century China, with its formulas becoming more refined and powerful over the subsequent centuries. It then traveled west along trade routes, appearing in the Middle East and Europe around the 13th century. For Greek fire, which was first deployed in the 7th century, to have been based on saltpeter, it would mean the Byzantines discovered, weaponized, and then completely lost the knowledge of this world-changing substance, all while leaving no cultural, technological, or chemical footprint for over 500 years until it was independently invented again in another part of the world. This stretches credulity. It seems far more likely that the terrifying acoustic and visual effects of Greek fire were achieved through the mechanics of the siphon and the violent reaction of other, more plausible chemicals like quicklime or phosphides with water. The roar was likely the sound of highly pressurized liquid and air being forced through a narrow bronze nozzle and igniting, a sound that would be utterly alien and terrifying to ancient ears, even without the presence of a true oxidizer. While the saltpeter theory is intellectually seductive, the weight of evidence suggests Greek fire's terror was born from a brilliant manipulation of petroleum and chemistry, not a premature discovery of the very substance that would eventually render all such weapons obsolete. Mixing these powerful ingredients was only half the battle. The true chemical genius lay in creating a mixture that wouldn't fail at the worst possible moment. We're not just talking about combining oil and resin in a barrel on dry land. This weapon had to be stored for weeks or even months in the hold of a Byzantine warship, enduring the constant rolling and pitching of the Mediterranean Sea, drastic temperature changes, and the corrosive effects of salty air. It then had to perform flawlessly under the immense pressure of the siphon's pump, ejecting as a perfectly homogeneous stream without clogging the delicate machinery or separating into its useless components. This wasn't a simple recipe, it was a feat of advanced chemical engineering centered on one critical concept: creating a stable emulsion. Think of a simple vinaigrette salad dressing. When you shake it vigorously, the oil and vinegar temporarily mix, creating a cloudy, unified liquid. But leave it sitting on the counter for just a few minutes and the laws of physics take over. The oil, being less dense, rises to the top while the vinegar, which is mostly water, sinks to the bottom, leaving you with two separate layers. Now imagine that vinaigrette is a highly volatile, sticky, incendiary gel, and separating means the naphtha might evaporate or become too concentrated. The quicklime could clump and sink into an unreactive sludge, and the entire batch could become a dangerous, unpredictable mess. A separated Greek fire mixture wouldn't project properly, might not ignite reliably, and could even destabilize and explode inside the siphon's reservoir, destroying the Byzantine ship from the inside out. The consequences of failure weren't just a lost battle, they were catastrophic. So how did they possibly prevent this inevitable separation? The answer likely lies in the use of a natural emulsifier, a substance that can bind oil and water-based components into a stable, long-lasting mixture. The ancient world was far more chemically savvy than we often give it credit for, and they had a deep understanding of natural products. One of the most promising candidates is pine resin itself. When certain resins are heated and processed, they can act as natural stabilizers, helping to suspend solid particles and prevent oils from coalescing and rising. Another strong possibility is the use of animal-based glues or proteins, perhaps derived from boiling fish skins or animal hides, which contain collagen, a natural emulsifying agent. The Byzantines might have created a mother mixture by slowly cooking pine resin with a small amount of this animal-based glue, creating a thick, sticky base. They could then gradually incorporate the naphtha into this base, whipping or agitating it continuously to form a stable, gelatinous emulsion that would hold the lightweight oil in suspension. Finally, they would carefully fold in the powdered reactive solid, whether it was quicklime or calcium phosphide, ensuring it was ground to a superfine, consistent powder to prevent it from immediately clumping or sinking. The final product would have been a thick, viscous slurry, something akin to a primitive napalm gel. This concoction would be thick enough to cling to targets, yet still fluid enough to be pumped under pressure. It would resist separating through weeks of storage at sea, only activating its full destructive potential the moment it was violently ejected from the siphon and met the seawater, triggering the ignition sequence. This intricate process of emulsification transforms the theory from a simple list of ingredients into a believable, functional weapon, showcasing a level of practical chemistry that was centuries ahead of its time. While the theories provide a fascinating chemical roadmap, the ultimate test lies in the flame itself. Across the globe, a dedicated community of historical reenactors, experimental archaeologists, and curious chemists have taken these ancient clues from the page and brought them to life in modern workshops and backyards, attempting to reverse engineer Greek fire through trial, error, and a healthy respect for safety protocols. These modern alchemists aren't just playing with fire, they're conducting a hands-on dialogue with history, and their successes, failures, and occasional singed eyebrows offer some of the most tangible insights we have into what the Byzantine fire masters might have actually achieved. A common starting point for many of these experiments is a combination rooted in historical precedent: pine resin, sulfur, and a petroleum product like lighter fluid or crude oil. This mixture honors the Byzantine tradition of using readily available Mediterranean materials. The process often involves carefully melting the solid pine resin in a double boiler, a necessary safety step the ancients would have performed in a large kettle over an open fire. Once the resin is liquefied, powdered sulfur is stirred in, followed by the gradual addition of the petroleum fuel. The result is a thick, black, tarry substance that burns with a fierce, smoky intensity. When this modern pitch is lit and thrown, it does indeed create a persistent, sticky fire that is difficult to extinguish with water, effectively replicating the basic adhesive and incendiary properties described in the accounts. For many reenactors, this mixture is a convincing demonstration of a period-appropriate incendiary, and it certainly would have been terrifying on an ancient battlefield. However, this simple pitch mixture immediately runs into the same problem faced by all modern experimenters: the pressurized siphon. A thick, tarry gel, while great for clinging, is a nightmare to pump. It quickly clogs any narrow tube or nozzle, making a continuous jet impossible. To solve this viscosity issue, many experimenters introduce a thinning agent. Some add wax, which when melted into the mixture can help modify its consistency, making it slightly more fluid while still retaining its adhesive quality when it cools on impact. Others take a more direct approach by increasing the ratio of lighter fluid or naphtha to create a less viscous, more pumpable liquid. This often works for the projection test, allowing a rudimentary stream of fire to be ejected from a homemade siphon, but it comes at a cost. The thinner the mixture, the less it clings to its target. It becomes more of a flowing liquid that can be sluiced away, losing the infamous, sticky quality that made Greek fire so uniquely horrifying. This creates a fundamental trade-off that every modern tester grapples with. The perfect balance between pumpability and adhesiveness seems to be the holy grail. The experiments become even more fascinating and significantly more dangerous when they incorporate self-igniting components. Brave or perhaps foolhardy individuals have attempted to mix powdered quicklime into their petroleum and resin slurry. The results are dramatic but notoriously unpredictable. As theory suggested, the quicklime often reacts prematurely with atmospheric humidity, causing the entire batch to heat up, smoke, and sometimes even ignite while still in its container, a catastrophic failure mode for a weapon that needed to be stored safely aboard a ship. Even when successfully projected, the ignition is rarely the instantaneous, roaring conflagration described by historians. It's more often a delayed sizzle and pop. Tests with calcium phosphide, though less common due to the difficulty of sourcing and safely handling the material, are far more convincing. When a mixture containing this compound hits water, it produces a ghostly, spontaneous flame that dances across the surface before igniting the main fuel, a spectacle that comes chillingly close to the ancient descriptions of the sea itself catching fire. These modern trials, for all their ingenuity, ultimately highlight the genius of the original Byzantine system. The success of Greek fire wasn't just in a list of ingredients, it was in the seamless integration of chemistry and engineering. The modern experimenter's struggle with viscosity implies the Byzantines possessed an emulsification secret we've yet to fully rediscover, a way to keep the mixture stable, pumpable, and adhesive all at once. The unpredictable results with quicklime suggest their formula may have been more complex, perhaps involving a protective coating for the reactive powder or a specific mixing sequence that prevented premature reaction. Every failure in a modern backyard is a clue pointing toward a level of sophistication that we are still working to understand. These enthusiasts, with their fire extinguishers at the ready, are not just recreating history, they are paying homage to the lost art of the Kallinikos clan, proving that some secrets guard themselves not just through words, but through the brilliant, intricate dance of practical application. While backyard experiments provide thrilling demonstrations, the true scientific search for Greek fire's formula moves from garages to sophisticated laboratories, where historians and chemists employ advanced technology to analyze the scant physical evidence that remains. This rigorous approach shifts the question from "what could it have been" to "what can we actually prove?" One of the most promising avenues of research involves the analysis of artifacts recovered from ancient Byzantine shipwrecks, particularly ceramic amphorae. These clay jars were the workhorses of ancient trade and military logistics, and it's highly plausible that special, sealed containers were used to transport the precious incendiary mixture. By subjecting the inner residues of these amphorae to gas chromatography mass spectrometry, scientists can identify the molecular fingerprints of substances that have been trapped for over a millennium. The process is incredibly delicate. Scientists carefully scrape microscopic samples from the pottery's pores, hoping to find traces of organic compounds that have survived centuries underwater. A strong signal for petroleum biomarkers would be a monumental find, directly linking these containers to the transport of naphtha. Similarly, detecting the unique chemical signatures of pine resin or sulfur would further solidify the recipe. However, the challenges are immense. Contamination from the marine environment is a constant problem. The sea is a chemical soup, and separating ancient residues from modern pollutants requires immense skill. Furthermore, the most volatile components of the mixture, like the light fractions of naphtha, would have evaporated or degraded long ago, leaving behind only the heavier, stickier residues like tar or pitch. This creates a biased sample, making it difficult to determine the original proportions or confirm the presence of the most crucial, volatile ingredients. Beyond analyzing artifacts, other researchers take a deductive approach, using computer modeling and chemical simulations to test the feasibility of various theoretical compositions. They create complex models that account for the energy required for projection, the burn temperature, and the reaction kinetics with water. These digital experiments can quickly rule out combinations that are thermodynamically impossible or would have been too unstable to store on a ship. For instance, a model might show that a mixture with a high quicklime content would generate too much heat too quickly, leading to a high probability of catastrophic failure inside the siphon reservoir. This virtual testing ground allows scientists to narrow down the vast field of possibilities to a handful of the most chemically plausible recipes, which can then be physically tested in controlled laboratory environments with precise measuring equipment to record burn temperatures, ignition delays, and flow characteristics. Yet, despite these powerful tools, the central obstacle remains unchanged: the absence of a verified original sample. Every analysis, whether of an amphora or a lab-made mixture, is ultimately a comparison against a ghost. Scientists can prove that a substance could have been used, but they cannot prove it was the fabled Greek fire. A petroleum residue in an amphora could indicate the transport of lamp oil or waterproofing tar. A successful modern test of a calcium phosphide mixture proves it works, but not that the Byzantines had the capability to produce it. This evidentiary gap means that the definitive conclusion continues to elude us. The academic pursuit, therefore, becomes less about declaring a single winner and more about building a consensus through the gradual elimination of impossibilities, inching closer to a truth we may never be able to hold in our hands but can understand with ever greater clarity. Yet for all our focus on the volatile chemistry, we might be chasing the wrong mystery. The true, unsung marvel of Greek fire may not have been the liquid in the tank but the machine that threw it. Recreating the infamous siphon presents a mechanical puzzle every bit as complex as the chemical one, a challenge in precision metallurgy and pump design that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the ancient world. Think of the terrifying contradiction this device had to master. It needed to be a sealed pressure vessel strong enough to contain a highly flammable, potentially reactive slurry being forcefully pumped with compressed air. Yet it also had to feature a narrow nozzle and a pumping mechanism delicate enough to control the stream. The slightest weakness, a poorly soldered seam or a minuscule crack, wouldn't just mean a leak under pressure, it would mean a catastrophic explosion that would instantly consume the ship and its crew. The operators weren't just soldiers, they were the first bomb disposal experts, trusting their lives to the skill of Byzantine metallurgists. The choice of bronze was absolutely critical. Iron would have been a death sentence. The constant contact with seawater would cause it to rust and weaken catastrophically, and the sparks generated from iron components striking together could easily ignite the entire reservoir. Bronze, however, is highly resistant to corrosion, especially in a marine environment. More importantly, the casting and working of bronze had been perfected over millennia. Byzantine craftsmen would have known exactly how to alloy it, how thick to cast the reservoir walls to withstand immense internal pressure, and how to expertly solder the seams to create a perfectly airtight vessel. This wasn't crude blacksmithing, it was the pinnacle of ancient precision metalworking, a technology they guarded as jealously as the formula itself. The siphon was a masterpiece of martial engineering, a testament to their understanding of material science that we often don't attribute to the so-called Dark Ages. Then there's the problem of the pump. We picture teams of strong men working a large, dual-action piston pump, not unlike those used by Roman fire brigades. But this pump had to be flawless. Any leak in the piston seals would allow compressed air to escape, robbing the stream of its force and projection. Worse, if the seal failed entirely, it could release fumes or even the flammable liquid itself into the crowded hold of the ship. The pump design likely involved precisely machined leather gaskets soaked in wax or oil to ensure a perfect seal, and valves that only opened in one direction to maintain constant pressure. The operators had to pump with a steady, rhythmic force too slow, and the stream would be a weak dribble, too fast and furious, and they risked overpressurizing the reservoir and causing a blowout. It was a dance with death, requiring immense training and coordination to unleash hell without becoming its first victims. This mechanical perspective completely changes our understanding of the secret. Perhaps the true reason Greek fire was never successfully reverse-engineered by their enemies wasn't just the chemical formula. It was the inability to replicate the sophisticated delivery system. An adversary might capture a jar of the mysterious liquid, but without the specially engineered bronze siphon and its bespoke pump, they could never hope to deploy it as the Byzantines did. They'd be left with a dangerous, sticky substance they could only throw in pots, a potent weapon, yes, but a far cry from the roaring, continuous jet that broke fleets. The secret of Greek fire was a symphony in two parts, a terrifying chemical composition and the brilliant, precise instrument built to conduct it. Losing knowledge of either one would render the other nearly useless, and it seems that is exactly what history chose to do, leaving us to wonder at the totality of their lost genius. While the Byzantine Empire perfected Greek fire, they were far from the only civilization to recognize the terrifying power of fire on the battlefield. Across the ancient and medieval world, from Rome to China, military engineers were independently developing their own nightmarish incendiaries, each tailored to their unique tactical needs. Understanding these parallel inventions is crucial because it throws the singular genius of Greek fire into even sharper relief, revealing why it was so much more than just another flaming weapon. The Roman army, for instance, made extensive use of a weapon they called philarica, a heavy, iron-tipped javelin. Before being launched from a ballista or thrown by hand, its tip was wrapped in flammable materials like pitch, oil, and hemp, then set ablaze. This fire dart was designed not just to pierce enemy fortifications but to ignite them, creating a potent psychological and tactical tool for sieges. Yet for all its effectiveness, it was a simple, single-use projectile. It lacked the sustained, continuous output and the horrifying aquatic properties that defined its Byzantine successor. Moving east, Chinese alchemists and military strategists were making their own groundbreaking discoveries. By the time Greek fire was defending Constantinople, Chinese texts already described a wide array of fire drugs and incendiaries. These often involved fascinating mixtures of petroleum, sulfur, and other combustibles, some even packed into pots or tubes to be thrown or projected. This technological path would eventually lead, centuries later, to the development of the true fire lance, an early gunpowder-based tube that shot a flame and sparks, and ultimately to the rocket and the gun. The Chinese approach was incredibly innovative, but it was also different in its fundamental application. Their incendiaries were often deployed in land-based warfare for breaking infantry formations or assaulting city walls. Greek fire, by contrast, was a weapon born of the sea, engineered explicitly for the chaotic, wet environment of naval combat, a context that demanded a completely different set of physical properties. Even in the later medieval period, European recipe books like that of Marcus Graecus contained formulas for what they called Greek fire. But these were almost certainly poor imitations, attempts to recreate a legend with locally available materials. These recipes typically call for familiar ingredients like pine pitch, sulfur, and oil, sometimes thickened with wax. When tested by modern historians, these mixtures produce a fearsome, sticky blaze that is incredibly difficult to put out, a potent weapon in its own right. But they consistently fail to replicate the two most defining characteristics: the ability to be pumped in a continuous stream and the terrifying phenomenon of burning on water. Without access to the volatile naphtha from the Black Sea region or the precise engineering of the bronze siphon, these European copies remained earth-bound, thick, tarry substances more suited for defending castle walls than dominating the waves. This global perspective reveals the true, unique triad of Greek fire's superiority. First was its base fuel, the light, water-repelling naphtha that allowed it to float and spread, a resource the Byzantines controlled and others largely did not. Second was its delivery system, the pressurized mechanical siphon that transformed it from a lobbed pot or a thrown dart into a targeted, continuous jet of flame, a piece of engineering that required advanced metallurgy and precision. And third was its theater of war, the open sea. This environment amplified its psychological impact 100-fold. On land, fire is a known hazard, but on the water, a sailor's one place of refuge, the sight of flames racing across the waves struck at a primal level of fear, undermining the very foundation of a naval warrior's confidence. While other cultures built terrifying fire, the Byzantines built a system, a perfect, horrifying marriage of unique chemistry, unparalleled mechanical engineering, and devastating psychological warfare designed for a specific, world-changing purpose. The decline of Greek fire was not a single event, but a slow fade into obscurity, a process inextricably linked to the fate of the empire it once saved. As the Byzantine Empire itself began to contract and weaken, the complex system required to produce and deploy this wonder weapon began to unravel. The first and most critical blow was the gradual loss of the territories that supplied its essential ingredients. The very naphtha seepages around the Black Sea and the Caucasus that gave the Byzantines their strategic advantage became harder to control. As rival powers like the Bulgarians, Venetians, and later the Seljuk Turks chipped away at the empire's borders, secure access to these specialized natural resources became unreliable and eventually vanished entirely. You cannot produce a weapon if you can no longer gather the raw materials that make it function, no matter how well you guard the instructions. Compounding this logistical nightmare was the weapon's own victim of success, its extreme secrecy. The knowledge wasn't stored in a library. It resided in the minds of a very small, likely hereditary group of specialists, the intellectual descendants of Kallinikos. This strategy was brilliant for security but catastrophic for preservation. History is filled with unforeseen disasters. A plague sweeps through Constantinople, a ship carrying the fire masters sinks, or the last members of the guild are killed in a single battle or palace intrigue without having passed on the complete oral tradition. When knowledge is held by so few, it exists on a knife's edge. A single calamity could sever the chain of transmission forever, turning a state secret into a permanent historical mystery. The very measures that protected it from enemies ultimately made it vulnerable to the simple, random accidents of time. Finally, the world of warfare itself was changing. The rise of gunpowder artillery in the late medieval period began to shift the paradigm of combat. While early cannons were cumbersome, inaccurate, and dangerous to their own crews, they represented a new and terrifying form of power, the power of directed explosion. These new weapons could smash through castle walls and hulls from a distance with brute force, a different kind of terror than the lingering, sticky inferno of Greek fire. For a struggling empire with dwindling resources, the calculus of military investment would have shifted. Maintaining the complex, expensive, and logistically difficult system for Greek fire would have seemed less appealing when compared to acquiring or developing the new technology of cannons, which used more common ingredients like saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. Greek fire didn't just become impossible to make, it may have simply become obsolete, a brilliant solution to the naval threats of the 7th century that had less relevance against the new challenges of the 13th and 14th. Its disappearance is a sad testament to the fact that even the most fearsome and advanced technology is not immortal. It can be lost to conquest, to time, and to the relentless forward march of progress. The introduction of Greek fire didn't just add a new weapon to the Byzantine arsenal. It fundamentally rewrote the entire playbook of naval warfare in the Mediterranean. For centuries, naval combat had followed a relatively predictable pattern. Success was determined by a combination of ramming with reinforced bronze prows, boarding enemy vessels with heavily armed marines, and a relentless barrage of arrows and javelins. It was a contest of ship construction, manpower, and brute force. A larger fleet with more soldiers almost always held the decisive advantage, and the Byzantines, often outnumbered and surrounded by enemies, were consistently on the wrong side of that equation. Greek fire changed all of that in an instant, shifting the critical advantage from sheer numbers to technological supremacy, and transforming the Byzantine navy from an underdog into an invincible force. This new weapon introduced the concept of standoff engagement to medieval naval warfare. Previously, to destroy an enemy ship, you had to get dangerously close to it, close enough to ram it or for your soldiers to leap onto its decks. This meant accepting significant risk and casualties in every encounter. The siphon changed the calculus entirely. A Byzantine dromon could now sit at a distance, safely outside the range of enemy archers and boarding parties, and project devastating force. The enemy's only hope was to close that gap as quickly as possible, but this played directly into Byzantine strategy. The mere threat of Greek fire forced opposing fleets into chaotic defensive maneuvers, breaking their formations and making them vulnerable to more conventional attacks. The psychological dominance was so complete that often the Byzantines didn't even need to use the weapon. The sight of the bronze siphons mounted on the prows of their ships was enough to cause panic and disarray, turning a battle before it even began. This technological edge allowed the smaller, more agile Byzantine fleet to control the sea lanes and defend the empire's long coastline with an efficiency that would have been impossible otherwise. They could engage much larger enemy armadas with confidence, knowing that a few well-aimed jets of fire could decimate the lead ships, sow terror throughout the entire fleet, and force a retreat. This defensive capability is the primary reason Constantinople, a city surrounded by water on three sides, withstood countless sieges for hundreds of years. Arab, Russian, and Bulgar fleets all learned to fear the fire that burned on water, and many assaults on the great city were broken not at its mighty land walls, but on the waves of the Golden Horn or the Sea of Marmara, where the Byzantine navy stood as an impassable, flaming barrier. The strategic impact extended far beyond direct combat. The secure maritime environment created by the fear of Greek fire allowed the Byzantine Empire to maintain its economic lifelines. Merchant convoys could travel with a greater sense of security under the protection of the imperial navy, ensuring the flow of goods, taxes, and information that were the lifeblood of the empire. This maritime dominance also gave the Byzantines immense diplomatic leverage. The implicit threat of unleashing their liquid fire during negotiations with rival powers or potential invaders was a powerful tool, a form of strategic deterrence that helped maintain a fragile balance of power for centuries. The weapon became so central to their identity that its secret was considered a matter of divine providence, a belief that further enhanced its mythos and the empire's perceived invincibility. In essence, Greek fire was the medieval equivalent of a nuclear deterrent, a terrifying, game-changing weapon that ensured the survival of a civilization long after its conventional military power had begun to wane, forever altering the destiny of the Mediterranean world. While the reality of Greek fire is complex enough, its legend has been amplified and often distorted by its dramatic appeal in modern films and video games. Popular culture frequently simplifies it into a straightforward, almost magical flame, a sort of medieval flamethrower that shoots simple fire. We see heroes and villains alike wielding handheld tubes that blast impressive but conventional orange jets, a spectacle that's visually exciting but historically inaccurate. This portrayal misses the very essence of what made the substance so terrifying and technologically advanced. The real weapon wasn't about a simple blaze, it was about a sentient, clinging, water-defying inferno that seemed to possess a malevolent life of its own, a quality that pure visual effects often fail to capture. These simplified depictions almost always gloss over the critical mechanics of the delivery system. Hollywood shows a single soldier effortlessly operating a handheld device, but the historical siphon was almost certainly a large, ship-mounted apparatus requiring a crew to operate its pumping mechanism and manage the immense pressure within the bronze reservoir. The portrayal of the flame itself is another area where fiction diverges from evidence. Modern media tends to show a clean, whooshing jet of yellow-orange fire, but every historical account emphasizes the thick, black smoke, the deafening roar, and the eerie sight of the fire spreading across the water in a film-like layer. The reality was less like a modern propane torch and more like a continuous stream of blazing napalm, a messy, chaotic, and horrifyingly persistent event. Perhaps the most significant myth perpetuated by pop culture is the idea that Greek fire was a ubiquitous weapon, used in every battle and available to any soldier. In reality, it was a state secret of the highest order, a strategic asset deployed sparingly and with immense psychological calculation. Its use was likely reserved for critical naval engagements where its shock value could decide the fate of an entire campaign, not for minor skirmishes. The idea of a rogue agent or a common foot soldier having access to its formula is a complete fiction, born from a need for narrative convenience rather than historical respect. The Byzantine Empire guarded this knowledge with a paranoia that makes modern state secrets look casual by comparison. By separating these modern myths from the historical reality, we don't diminish the wonder of Greek fire, we actually enhance it. Understanding that it wasn't magic but a sophisticated combination of chemistry and engineering makes its story far more compelling. It was a human invention born from desperation and genius, a testament to what can be achieved even with ancient technology. The truth that a civilization over 1,000 years ago could harness natural resources and advanced mechanics to create a weapon that still baffles us today is infinitely more impressive than any magical flame could ever be. It shifts the narrative from a simple tale of a superweapon to a complex saga of human innovation, secrecy, and the fragile nature of knowledge itself. So, after this deep dive into the history, the chemistry, and the engineering, we arrive at the ultimate question hanging over this entire mystery. With all of our 21st century knowledge and technology, could we actually recreate authentic Greek fire today? The answer, fascinatingly, is both a definitive yes and a respectful no, depending entirely on what you mean by recreate. From a purely chemical and engineering standpoint, the challenge is absolutely within our grasp. Modern chemists possess a complete understanding of the principles involved. We could, without a doubt, formulate a substance that matches every single terrifying property described in the ancient texts. We could create a stable, napalm-like gel using light crude oil and a pine resin thickener. We could incorporate a pyrophoric compound like calcium phosphide to achieve that horrifying, self-igniting effect on water. Our metallurgists could craft a far superior bronze siphon with precision pumps and pressure gauges, creating a delivery system more reliable and powerful than anything the Byzantines could have ever dreamed of. We could absolutely build a weapon that looks, sounds, and acts like Greek fire, and it would be a devastatingly effective incendiary. In this sense, the mystery is solved. We know how to make a substance that fits the historical description. But here is the crucial, insurmountable caveat. We could never be certain that what we created was the exact formula used by the Kallinikos clan. This is the fundamental difference between a highly effective approximation and a true, authentic recreation. The problem is one of historical verification, not scientific capability. Without a physical sample from a 7th century siphon reservoir or a verified, unedited recipe from a Byzantine manual, any formula we devise is ultimately an educated guess, a brilliant, plausible, and terrifyingly effective guess, but a guess nonetheless. We are reverse engineering a ghost, working backwards from effects to causes without the original blueprint. Think of it like trying to perfectly replicate a legendary chef's dish solely from a diner's ecstatic description written 1,000 years ago. You know it was spicy, savory, incredibly rich, and had a mysterious aroma no one could place. You can use your knowledge of modern cuisine to create a dish that matches that description perfectly, and it might even be the most delicious thing anyone has ever tasted. But could you ever be 100% certain that you used the exact same variety of pepper, the precise cut of meat, and the identical blend of herbs that the original chef used? Without the original recipe, that absolute certainty is forever out of reach. Our modern recreations of Greek fire are that award-winning dish. They fulfill the brief spectacularly, but the true historical recipe died with its creators. Therefore, the scientific verdict is a fascinating blend of triumph and humility. We have the knowledge to solve the functional puzzle, but the historical one remains eternally locked. The loss of the secret was so total, the secrecy so absolute, that it created a perfect informational vacuum. This leaves us with a profound respect for the Byzantine inventors. Their combination of practical chemistry, mechanical engineering, and psychological warfare was so advanced for its time that even with all our tools, we are left to admire their achievement from across the centuries, never quite able to peer over their shoulders and see the final, critical measurement. We can mimic the fire, but we cannot reclaim the original spark. This technological triumph, however, leads us directly to a far more profound and unsettling question that lingers long after the chemical mystery is solved. Even if we possess the certainty and the capability to perfectly recreate Greek fire, a haunting ethical dilemma emerges. Just because we can, does that mean we should? We are not talking about resurrecting an ancient bread recipe or a forgotten musical instrument. This is a weapon of mass terror, a tool designed for one purpose only: to inflict horrific, indiscriminate suffering and death. The act of revival, even within the sterile confines of a laboratory or for a historical documentary, forces us to confront the moral weight of such knowledge and the responsibility that comes with wielding it, even symbolically. At its core, this is a question about the purpose of historical understanding itself. Is our goal to know everything, to fill every gap in the historical record, regardless of the nature of that knowledge? Or do we have a responsibility to let some sleeping dragons lie, to acknowledge that certain Pandora's boxes once opened are best left in the past? There is a powerful argument that by recreating Greek fire, even for educational purposes, we risk normalizing and even glorifying a weapon of immense cruelty. We risk turning a horrific instrument of war into a spectacle, a fascinating party trick for the camera, divorced from the very real human agony it was designed to cause. The screams of those sailors, the smell of burning flesh and pitch, the terror of a death that clung and could not be escaped, these are the truths that get lost in the clean, scientific pursuit of a perfect chemical replica. Modern international law casts a long and judgmental shadow over any attempt to bring such a weapon back into the world, even conceptually. The principles enshrined in treaties like the Geneva Conventions were written precisely to prohibit the use of weapons that cause unnecessary suffering or superfluous injury, as well as those that are inherently indiscriminate in their effects. Greek fire, by its very design, checks all of these boxes. Its adhesive, persistent nature ensures a slow, agonizing death that cannot be easily remedied. Its propensity to spread uncontrollably across water makes it impossible to target precisely, threatening civilian vessels, marine life, and the environment long after a battle has concluded. By modern standards, its use would be considered a war crime, a blatant violation of the laws of armed conflict that the global community has worked for decades to establish. Therefore, the act of recreation, even in a controlled setting, becomes a paradoxical dance with a banned substance. It forces us to hold a mirror up to our own humanity, questioning whether our insatiable curiosity is worth potentially providing a blueprint, however theoretical, for a weapon that civilization has collectively agreed to outlaw. While the likelihood of a modern military adopting a 7th century incendiary is negligible, the underlying principles of its terror, sticky, unquenchable flames, are all too relevant. Our pursuit of historical truth could inadvertently inspire new forms of atrocity, proving that some secrets are lost for a reason, and that their obscurity itself is a form of protection. Perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to the victims of this terrifying invention is not to master its formula, but to respect the terrible power it once held by allowing its most devastating secrets to remain forever extinguished. The terrifying specter of Greek fire may have faded from the seas, but its fundamental principle, the psychological and tactical power of projected, persistent flame, refused to be extinguished by time. While the Byzantine Empire's specific formula was lost, the underlying concept of a weaponized, unquenchable fire became a haunting ideal that military engineers across the centuries continually sought to rediscover and reinvent. This relentless pursuit creates a direct, albeit fragmented, lineage from the bronze siphons of Constantinople to the devastating incendiary weapons of the modern era, proving that the desire to wield fire as a tool of war is a constant in human history. We can trace this evolution through a series of incremental advancements, each building on the last. In the medieval period, simpler incendiaries like fire pots or clay jars filled with a mix of pitch, oil, and quicklime designed to shatter and ignite on impact became common in both siege and naval warfare. These were a clear, if cruder, attempt to replicate the clinging, horrific effect of their Byzantine predecessor. By the Renaissance, ingenious minds like Leonardo da Vinci were sketching designs for more sophisticated devices, including proposed pumps and wagons for projecting flame, showing how the idea of a mechanical flamethrower continued to capture the military imagination, even if the technology to build a reliable one still lagged behind. The true reincarnation of Greek fire's core concept, however, arrived not on the water but in the trenches of the First World War. The modern flamethrower, as pioneered by the German army, finally solved the mechanical puzzle that had baffled others for a millennium. Using pressurized inert gas to propel a stream of ignited oil, it created a practical, man-portable system for projecting fire. While its fuel was simpler than the mysterious Byzantine mixture, its purpose was identical: to clear entrenched positions through a combination of intense heat and overwhelming psychological terror. The sight of a soldier advancing behind a roaring jet of flame that could curl around corners and flood into bunkers was the 20th century equivalent of a Byzantine dromon turning its siphon toward an enemy fleet, a weapon designed to break the enemy's will as much as to destroy their fortifications. But the most direct spiritual successor to Greek fire emerged during the Second World War and saw extensive use in Korea and Vietnam: napalm. This was the moment when chemistry finally caught up with the ancient legends. Developed at Harvard University in 1942, napalm is a thickening agent mixed with a volatile petroleum fuel to create a sticky, gelatinous substance. Its name comes from its original thickeners, aluminum salts of naphthenic and palmitic acids. This mixture is terrifyingly effective because it adheres to surfaces including human skin while burning at extreme temperatures for a prolonged period. Like its ancient inspiration, napalm is notoriously difficult to extinguish with water. Indeed, water often serves to spread the burning gel, worsening the catastrophe. The deployment of napalm, particularly from aircraft in massive canisters, took the principle of area denial and psychological warfare to a horrific new scale. The image of fire raining from the sky and clinging to everything in its path is a chilling, modern echo of those ancient accounts of the sea itself burning. It fulfilled the Byzantine ideal of a persistent, unquenchable incendiary that could not be easily countered, becoming one of the most controversial and feared weapons of the 20th century. Its use eventually led to international restrictions, a sobering modern parallel to the way Greek fire itself was eventually lost, perhaps because its destructive power was too terrible to wield responsibly. This journey from the 7th to the 20th century reveals a sobering truth about military technology. The specific chemistry may change, and the delivery systems may evolve from bronze pumps to aerial bombs, but the underlying tactical desire remains constant. The quest for a weapon that harnesses the primal fear of fire, that clings and consumes and cannot be stopped, is a thread that connects the Kallinikos clan to the laboratories of the modern world. Greek fire was not an anomaly. It was the first brilliant prototype in a long and dreadful lineage of incendiary warfare, a testament to the enduring and often terrifying power of a simple, devastating idea. Perhaps what truly captivates us about Greek fire is how it shatters one of our most comforting modern myths, the myth of linear progress. We like to imagine human history as a steady, upward climb, a story where each generation builds upon the last, adding its own brick to an ever-rising tower of knowledge. We are the pinnacle, the beneficiaries of all that has come before. Yet here is a technology 1,000 years old, so advanced and so effective that it decided the fate of empires, and then it simply vanished. Its disappearance is a stark reminder that the Tower of Knowledge is not always under construction. Sometimes whole wings are demolished, their blueprints lost, leaving behind only the echo of their former glory. This idea that brilliance can be achieved and then utterly forgotten challenges our very sense of technological superiority. It suggests that the past might hold secrets we have not yet rediscovered, that ancient minds arrived at solutions we are still struggling to piece back together. This lost marvel taps into a deep, almost primal fascination with secrets and the allure of forbidden knowledge. Greek fire is the ultimate historical locked room mystery, a puzzle box crafted by masters of obfuscation. It invites us to become detectives across centuries, sifting through fragmented texts, analyzing chemical possibilities, and debating engineering feats. It's a mystery that refuses to be solved, and in that refusal lies its enduring power. A mystery that is easily solved loses its magic, but one that perpetually dances just beyond our grasp continues to fuel our curiosity and imagination indefinitely. We are drawn to the romance of the quest itself, to the idea that somewhere in a forgotten manuscript or an unanalyzed artifact, the final key might still be waiting. On a grander scale, the story of Greek fire holds up a mirror to our own civilization. It forces us to confront the fragile nature of our own knowledge. We live in a digital age where we believe our data is immortal, backed up on servers and stored in the cloud. But the Byzantines thought their secret was safe too, locked away in the minds of a chosen few and protected by an empire they believed would last forever. Their empire fell and their secret died with it. Our own repositories of knowledge, for all their apparent permanence, are vulnerable to societal collapse, to electromagnetic pulses, to the simple, slow decay of forgotten file formats. Greek fire is a cautionary tale about the fragility of human achievement, a reminder that no technology, no matter how powerful, is truly permanent unless it is continuously understood, maintained, and passed on. Ultimately, this ancient weapon endures in our collective consciousness because it is more than a historical footnote. It is a powerful symbol. It represents the breathtaking heights of human ingenuity when faced with existential threats. It symbolizes the immense power that can be wielded through the combination of scientific curiosity and practical engineering. And at the same time, it embodies the profound responsibility that comes with such dangerous knowledge and the sobering reality that even our greatest triumphs can be erased by the relentless passage of time. It is a story of creation and loss, of brilliance and oblivion, a flame that burns not on water, but in our imagination, challenging us to wonder what other wonders have been lost to the ages and what secrets we ourselves might one day leave behind. From its terrifying debut against the Arab fleet to the modern scientific hunt through ancient texts and laboratories, the journey of Greek fire is a story of human ingenuity shadowed by profound loss. We've followed the clues from the naphtha seepages of the Black Sea to the sophisticated bronze siphons, from the theories of quicklime and phosphide to the modern-day experiments that come so close yet can never claim to be the real thing. This centuries-long quest, while it may never uncover the exact formula, ultimately reveals something far more significant about the incredible sophistication of the ancient world. It forces us to abandon the simplistic notion of linear progress and instead recognize that brilliance can flare up in unexpected eras, achieving a level of technological artistry that can still leave us in awe. The enduring power of this mystery lies not in the fire itself, but in the cautionary tale it tells about the fragile nature of knowledge and the dual edge of technological discovery. Greek fire was a salvation for an empire, a weapon that held back the tide of invasion for centuries, yet its secret was so potent, so dangerous, that it had to be buried under layers of obfuscation and ultimately vanished with its creators. It stands as a permanent symbol of this eternal tension, the human drive to create and innovate, forever balanced against the immense responsibility that comes with wielding such power. Some secrets, it seems, are not meant to be rediscovered. Their greatest legacy is the humbling reminder that our grasp on progress is always tenuous, and that the most powerful inventions are those that can shape history, only to disappear, leaving behind only the echo of their flame and a question about what we might one day forget.